"No one wants me. I need a husband," begged the Apache woman to the rancher for one last chance. She had learned how to become small without disappearing. Every morning, the Apache woman woke before the sun, not because she wanted to, but because sleep did not stay with her for long. The cold always found her first. It crept through the thin blanket she owned, pressed against her bones, and reminded her that she did not belong anywhere anymore. She would sit up slowly, rubbing her hands together, waiting for the stiffness in her fingers to loosen enough so she could move. Around her, the land was quiet, the kind of quiet that was not peaceful but empty. The small edge of town where she stayed was a place people passed through, not a place they noticed. Broken fences leaned like tired men. Old sheds stood with doors half open, holding nothing but dust. This was where she lived now, on land that did not argue her presence because it did not care. She used to have a home. Once long ago, she had been someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone whose name was spoken with warmth. She remembered the sound of laughter around a fire, the smell of cooked food, the feeling of belonging without needing to earn it. Those memories came to her now like distant songs, beautiful but painful. She tried not to hold them too long because remembering made the present harder to bear. In town, people knew her face but not her story, and that was how they preferred it. They saw her walking alone, always alone. They noticed her worn clothes, the careful way she avoided looking at anyone for too long. Some whispered that she brought bad luck. Others said she was difficult or strange or too quiet to trust. No one asked her what she had lost. No one asked how she had survived this long. She worked when she could, small tasks, cleaning, carrying water, helping for a meal instead of money. She never complained. Complaining invited attention, and attention often came with judgment. She had learned that silence was safer. But silence did not keep hunger away. As the days grew shorter and the air sharper, fear settled deeper inside her. Winter did not forgive mistakes. Winter did not care about pride. She counted what little she had again and again, hoping the numbers would change if she looked long enough. They never did. At night, she lay awake and listened to the wind. It moved freely across the land, touching everything without being rejected. She wondered what it felt like to be unafraid of where you would rest when the sun went down. She knew the truth, even if she did not speak it aloud. No one wanted her, not as a wife, not as a partner, not even as a responsibility. She was too much of everything people feared, too poor, too alone, too connected to a past they did not want to remember. She had asked for help before in quiet ways, a place to stay for a few nights, work that lasted longer than a day. Each time the answer had been polite but firm. No, rejection changes a person slowly. It does not arrive all at once. It comes in looks that slide away too quickly, in doors that close gently as if to soften the sound, in voices that say, "I'm sorry," without meaning it. Over time, she stopped expecting anything else. But the body has limits, even when the heart tries to endure. One afternoon, as the sky darkened earlier than it should have, she felt something inside her finally give way. Not in a loud or dramatic way, just a quiet understanding. If nothing changed, she would not survive the coming months. That was when she thought of the rancher. She had seen him before. Everyone had. He was known in town, but not in a friendly way. He spoke little, worked hard, and kept to himself. His land stretched wide beyond the edge of town, open and strong like the man himself. People said he was fair but distant, kind but closed. No wife, no children, no one knew why. She had noticed him watching her once long ago, not staring. Just observing, the way someone looks at a storm on the horizon, unsure if it will pass or come closer. At the time, she had looked away, embarrassed to be seen. Now the thought of him stayed. It was not hope. She did not allow herself that luxury. It was desperation mixed with reason. He had land, he had stability, and most importantly, he had no one. The idea of going to him made her stomach twist. To ask for anything, especially something so serious, felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing how far the ground was. She rehearsed the words in her mind, then hated herself for even thinking them. She waited 3 days. Each day the cold grew worse. Each night sleep came less. On the third morning she stood up and knew she could not wait any longer. Pride would not keep her warm. Silence would not save her. She washed her face with cold water and tied her hair back neatly, not because she wanted to look pretty, but because she wanted to look respectful. Dignity was the last thing she still owned, and she would not abandon it. The walk to the ranch felt longer than it was. With every step, doubts tried to pull her back. Who do you think you are? Why would he listen? Why would anyone choose you? She kept walking anyway. When she reached the fence, she stopped. The land beyond it was wide and open, stretching under a pale sky. Cattle moved slowly in the distance. The house stood solid and quiet, built by hands that believed in permanence. For a moment, she considered turning around. No one would blame her. No one expected anything from her. But then she thought of the night wind, of the empty mornings, of the way fear had begun to feel heavier than hunger. She stepped forward. She did not know what she would say yet, only that she could no longer stay silent. Only that this was her last chance to ask for a future instead of waiting for the end. As she walked toward the house, her heart beat hard, not with hope, but with courage she did not know she still possessed. Whatever happened next, she would face it standing. The rancher had built his life around quiet. He woke each morning before the light touched the hills, not because he loved the early hours, but because work waited whether he felt ready or not. The land demanded attention. Animals needed care. Fences needed repair. Crops did not pause for grief or memory. Routine had become his shelter, the one thing that never asked him questions. He lived alone by choice, or at least that was what he told himself. People in town thought they knew him. They said he was cold or proud or too serious. Some said he had no heart. Others said he had one once and lost it. He did not correct them. Letting people believe what they wanted was easier than explaining truths he barely understood himself. Years earlier, he had imagined a different life. A house filled with voices. A table set for more than one. Plans that reached further than the next season. That version of him felt like someone he had known in another lifetime. Loss had changed the shape of his days, narrowing them, making them safer but smaller. Out here, alone with the land, nothing surprised him, or so he believed. He had noticed the Apache woman long before she ever came near his fence. At first, she was just another figure moving quietly at the edge of town. But over time, his eyes learned to find her without trying. The way she walked carefully, as if the ground itself might reject her. The way she kept her head slightly lowered, not in shame but in defense. He told himself it meant nothing. Yet sometimes, while fixing a gate or watching the cattle settle, he would find his thoughts drifting to her. He wondered where she slept when the nights turned cold. He wondered how someone could look so tired and still keep moving forward. Those thoughts annoyed him. Curiosity led to responsibility, and responsibility led to pain. He had learned that lesson well, so he kept his distance. From time to time, he saw others turn away from her. He saw the quick excuses, the polite refusals. He pretended not to notice the way her shoulders stiffened afterward. He told himself it was none of his concern. The world was full of suffering. He could not carry it all. Still, something about her stayed with him. On the morning she arrived at his ranch, he sensed her before he saw her. The animals were unsettled, lifting their heads, shifting their weight. He straightened from his work and looked toward the fence. She stood there small against the open land, hands clasped in front of her as if holding herself together. She did not cross the boundary right away. She waited, giving him the chance to send her away without words. For a moment, he considered doing just that. He was tired. The day was already heavy with tasks, and whatever had brought her here would not be simple. He felt an old instinct rise in him, urging him to turn back to his work, to let silence solve the problem. But she did not move. She stood there with a stillness that was not demanding, not dramatic, just present. It reminded him of the way the land waited for rain, not begging, not angry, simply enduring. He walked toward her slowly. Up close, he saw details he had not noticed before. The careful way she had cleaned her face despite having little water, the neatness of her hair, the effort it took to stand straight when exhaustion pulled her downward. These were not the marks of someone careless or lazy. They were the signs of someone who had been trying for a very long time. "What do you need?" he asked. His voice sounded rough, even to himself. He had not meant it that way, but kindness was a muscle he had not used in years. She looked up at him, and for a brief second something like fear crossed her face. Then it settled into resolve. "I need to speak with you," she said quietly. He nodded once and stepped aside, allowing her inside the fence. That small action felt larger than it should have. As if he had already crossed a line he could not return from. They stood a few feet apart, the open land stretching around them. No walls, no witnesses, just two people who had learned to survive in different ways. He waited. She took a breath, then another. Whatever words she carried were heavy. He could see it in the way her hands tightened, then relaxed, then tightened again. "I know you don't owe me anything," she began, "and I know I shouldn't be here." He almost stopped her there. Almost told her she was right, that this was a mistake, but something in her tone held him still. It was not pleading. It was honest, and honesty was harder to turn away from. She spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. She did not tell him everything, only what mattered. That she had no family left, that she worked when she could, that winter was coming and she was afraid. She did not accuse the town. She did not ask for pity. When she finally paused, the silence felt thick. He looked at the ground, then back at her. His mind searched for reasons to refuse. He found many. He lived alone for a reason. His life was balanced the way it was. Adding another person meant change, and change had once cost him dearly. Yet he could not ignore what stood in front of him. This was not a person looking for an easy life. This was someone standing at the edge of losing everything, still holding onto dignity with both hands. "You shouldn't think this way," he said finally, "about yourself." She gave a small, tired smile. "Thinking doesn't change reality." Her words struck him harder than he expected. He had spent years believing he was protecting himself by staying alone. But listening to her, he wondered whether protection had quietly turned into avoidance. Whether he had mistaken safety for strength. He did not give her an answer that day. Instead, he told her she could rest, that he would bring water, that she could sit in the shade. Small things, practical things, things that felt safer than promises. As he walked away to fetch what she needed, he felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not attraction, not obligation, something quieter and more dangerous. Recognition. For the first time in years, he saw himself reflected in another person, not in her circumstances, but in her endurance, in the way she had learned to live with loss without letting it define her entirely. That realization unsettled him more than any request ever could. As the sun climbed higher, he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever decision he made next would change more than just her life. The shade of the tree felt cooler than the rest of the land, but the woman could not relax. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her back straight, as if standing would be easier than sitting with her thoughts. Every sound made her alert: the wind in the grass, the distant movement of animals, the quiet steps of the rancher as he returned with water. He placed the container near her and stepped back, giving her space. That small act told her something important. He was careful, not afraid but aware. She drank slowly, not wanting to appear desperate, even though her throat burned from dryness. When she finished, she nodded in thanks. They stood there again, surrounded by silence. It was she who broke it. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she said. Her voice was steady, but only because she forced it to be. "I know what people say about me. I know how it looks." He listened without interrupting. He had learned that some moments asked for patience more than answers. "I've tried every other way," she continued. "Work, waiting, hoping someone would see me as useful, but winter doesn't wait for hope." She paused, then lifted her eyes to meet his. This time she did not look away. "No one wants me," she said plainly, "and I understand why. I have nothing to offer that people can see." The words hung between them, heavy and honest. He felt a tightness in his chest, the kind that came when truth struck too close to something buried. "I'm not asking for love," she went on. "I'm not asking for comfort. I'm asking for one chance to survive with dignity." He shifted his weight, unsure what to do with his hands, his thoughts, his memories. He had faced storms, injuries, long nights alone, but this was different. This was a human moment, and those had always been the hardest for him. "What exactly are you asking?" he asked at last. She took a breath. This was the edge she had been walking toward since she left town. "I need a husband," she said softly. "Not for romance, not for appearances, for safety, for a place in this world where I won't be pushed aside anymore." Saying the words felt like tearing something open inside her. She did not cry. She would not. Tears made people uncomfortable, and discomfort often led to rejection. The rancher looked away, staring across the open land. His thoughts raced, pulling him backward through years he tried not to remember. He had sworn never to bind his life to another again. Promises had once felt solid. Then they had broken, leaving him alone with responsibility and regret. "This isn't something you ask lightly," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I waited until I had no other choice." Her honesty left him with nowhere to hide. He turned back to her. "You deserve more than a decision made out of fear." She shook her head gently. "Fear doesn't erase truth. It just forces it into the open." He studied her face, searching for something. Manipulation, desperation without depth, any sign that this was a mistake waiting to happen. What he found instead was exhaustion mixed with courage, not the loud kind. The quiet kind that lasts longer. "I can work," she added. "I already do. I won't be a burden. I don't expect kindness every day. Just fairness, fairness." That word followed him as he walked away again, this time not for supplies but to think. He paced the length of the fence, running his hand along the rough wood, grounding himself in something solid. The land had always been simple. You put in effort, you got results. People were not like that. He thought of the long evenings spent eating alone. The nights when silence felt less like peace and more like an echo. He had told himself he preferred it that way. Now he wondered if preference had slowly turned into habit. When he returned, she was still there, still waiting. She had not moved closer. She had not tried to make her presence larger. She respected the boundary, even as she stood on the edge of losing everything. "I can't promise you what you're asking for," he said carefully. "Not yet." Her shoulders lowered slightly, though she nodded. "I understand." But he continued, surprising himself with the word, "I won't turn you away today." She looked up, hope flickering despite her efforts to keep it hidden. "You can stay here for now," he said. "Work, eat, rest. We'll see how things go." It was not what she had asked for, but it was more than she had expected. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but full. As the days passed, she did exactly as she promised. She worked without complaint, learned the routines, respected his space. She spoke when spoken to, but did not withdraw. Slowly the land adjusted to her presence, and so did he. They shared meals in near silence at first. Not awkward silence, just unfamiliar. Over time, a few words crept in. Simple exchanges, practical matters, nothing personal, yet something changed. He began to notice the way she cared for small things, how she fixed a loose strap instead of ignoring it, how she spoke softly to the animals, how she thanked him every day as if kindness were not expected, but chosen. One evening, as the sky burned orange and red, she stood beside him at the fence. "I know this isn't what I asked for," she said, "and I won't bring it up again if you don't want me to." He watched the sun dip low. "Why did you choose me?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Because you see people, even when you pretend you don't." The answer unsettled him more than he liked. That night, as he lay awake, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch, he realized something important. Her plea had not taken his control. It had returned it to him. For the first time in years, his next step was not decided by fear of loss, but by the possibility of meaning. And that realization would not let him sleep. Life on the ranch did not change all at once. It changed slowly, in small and almost invisible ways, the kind that only became clear when someone stopped to look back. The woman woke before dawn, just as the rancher did. At first, she rose quietly, careful not to disturb him, unsure of where she stood in this new place. She took on tasks without being asked, sweeping, carrying water, tending to small chores that kept the day moving. She did not act like a guest. She acted like someone who understood that belonging was built through effort. The rancher noticed. He said little, but his eyes followed her movements more often than he realized. She worked with steady hands and a focused mind. When something broke, she fixed it if she could. When she could not, she asked once and remembered the answer. There was no laziness in her, no expectation of being carried. She moved like someone who had learned to rely only on herself. At meals, they sat across from each other, the table wide enough to hold distance. At first, the silence felt heavy, not uncomfortable but uncertain. He had grown used to eating alone, to thoughts being his only company. Now there was another presence, quiet but real. Sometimes he caught himself wanting to speak and then stopping, unsure what to say. Conversation had once come easily to him. Now it felt like a skill he had forgotten. She never pushed him. That, more than anything, eased his mind. She did not ask again about marriage. She did not try to win him over with words or tears. She let time do the work, trusting that actions spoke louder than promises. Days turned into weeks. The ranch began to feel different, not louder, not softer, just fuller. There was someone else to notice when the weather shifted, someone else to share the weight of long afternoons. Evenings no longer ended with him sitting alone, staring at the fading light. Sometimes she would sit nearby, mending something, her presence calm and steady. He found himself sleeping better, not because his worries had disappeared, but because his days felt more complete. The land responded too. Work seemed lighter when shared, even when no words passed between them. One afternoon, a storm rolled in faster than expected. The sky darkened, wind cutting across the fields. He called out to her and she responded immediately, helping guide the animals to shelter. They moved together without confusion, as if they had worked side by side for years. When the storm passed, they stood under the open sky, both wet, both breathing hard. "You did well," he said. The words surprised them both. She smiled, not wide or proud, but warm. "So did you." That simple exchange lingered longer than either expected. That night they shared a longer conversation. Not about the past, but about small things, weather, land, the work ahead. It felt easy, natural, like two people slowly finding a rhythm they had forgotten existed. Yet beneath the calm, tension lived. The woman felt it in quiet moments. She had not forgotten why she came. Safety without certainty was still fragile. She belonged here, but only by permission, and permission could be taken away. Some nights, fear returned. What if he decided this arrangement was temporary? What if kindness ran out? The rancher had his own unease. He began to care in ways he had sworn off. When she worked too long, he noticed. When she grew quiet, he wondered why. Concern crept in before he could stop it, and concern led to attachment. Attachment had once cost him everything. He tried to pull back. He worked longer hours, spoke less, kept his distance. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. But she did not confront him. Instead, she gave him space, just as she always had. That restraint affected him more than any argument could have. One evening, as the sun set in soft colors across the land, he found her sitting alone near the fence. She looked peaceful, but there was a quiet sadness in her posture. "You don't have to leave," he said without thinking. She turned, surprised. "I wasn't planning to." He realized then how deeply the fear of loss had been living in him, not of losing her but of choosing her and failing again. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Sharing a life, making room." She listened, not interrupting. "I'm not asking you to promise forever," she said gently, "just to be honest today." Her words settled something inside him. From that moment things shifted again, not suddenly but with intention. He stopped pulling away. He allowed himself to care openly, to speak when something mattered, to accept her presence not as temporary help, but as part of his daily life. Trust grew between them, built on consistency rather than emotion. They learned each other's habits, moods, silences. They learned when to speak and when to let quiet do its work. People in town began to notice. The woman no longer walked alone. She carried herself differently, not because her life was easy, but because she had a place to return to at the end of the day. Still, the question remained unspoken between them. What were they becoming? Neither rushed to name it. Naming things made them fragile. Instead, they lived the answer slowly, one shared day at a time, until the shape of their future began to form without needing to be forced. And in that quiet, patient living, both of them changed more than they ever expected. The change did not arrive with a single moment or a clear decision. It arrived the way morning light does, quietly, steadily, until suddenly everything could be seen more clearly. By the time winter fully settled over the land, the woman no longer felt like a visitor. She knew where everything belonged. She knew the rhythm of the ranch, the moods of the animals, the signs of coming weather. She knew the rancher, too, not all of him, but enough to understand when he needed quiet and when he welcomed company. And he knew her. He knew how she liked her work organized, how she paused before speaking when something mattered, how she always finished a task no matter how tired she felt. He noticed the way she hummed softly when she thought no one was listening, and how she watched the horizon as if it still surprised her that she was allowed to stay. The cold was harsh that year, but the house was warmer than it had been in a long time. They shared responsibilities without discussion. If one started a task, the other joined naturally. Evenings became something neither of them rushed through anymore. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Both felt right. One night, as snow fell softly outside, the rancher added another log to the fire and sat down across from her. The flames reflected in his eyes, making him look younger somehow, less burdened. "You've changed this place," he said. She looked up, startled. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." She lowered her eyes, unsure how to receive the words. Praise was unfamiliar, acceptance even more so. "You've changed me too," she admitted quietly. He studied her face, seeing not the woman who had once stood at his fence in fear, but someone steady, present, and strong. Someone who belonged here, not because she had asked to, but because she had built her place through patience and honesty. The question they had avoided for so long finally surfaced between them. He took a slow breath. "When you came here, you asked for something," she nodded. "I did." "I didn't answer you then," he said. "Not really." She waited, her heart steady but alert. She had learned not to rush hope. "I was afraid," he continued. "Not of you, of myself, of failing again, of opening a door I had locked for a reason." She listened, understanding more than he realized. "I don't know what the right way to do this is," he said. "But I know what feels honest." He met her eyes. "If you still want it," he said carefully, "I would like to stand beside you, not because you need saving, not because I owe you, but because I choose you." The room felt very quiet. She did not answer right away. Not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to speak from the same place of honesty. "When I came to you," she said, "I was afraid I had nothing left to offer. I thought survival was all I could ask for." She paused, then continued. "But I don't want to be chosen out of pity, or fear, or habit," he nodded. Neither do I. She looked around the room, the fire, the walls she had helped repair, the life she had slowly built here. Then yes, she said, I still want it. The agreement was not loud or dramatic. There were no grand gestures, just two people acknowledging what had already grown between them. Word spread through town slowly. Some were surprised, some were doubtful, a few were unkind. But the woman had learned that not every voice deserved space in her heart. She walked differently now, not proudly but securely. She was no longer the woman no one wanted. She was a partner. Life did not become perfect. They argued at times. They misunderstood each other. Old fears surfaced now and then. But they faced those moments together without running, without silence turning into walls. The rancher found himself smiling more, laughing, even. The land felt less heavy. The future no longer felt like something to endure, but something to shape. For the woman, dignity returned in full, not because she had been rescued, but because she had been seen and respected. She no longer begged for space in the world. She stood firmly in it. On a clear morning near the end of winter, they stood together outside, watching the snow begin to melt. It's strange, she said softly, how close I came to disappearing. He took her hand, simple and sure. You didn't disappear, he said. You endured. She looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes, not for what he had given her, but for what they had chosen to build. Their story was not one of miracles or sudden change. It was a story of quiet courage, of choosing kindness when fear felt easier, of understanding that sometimes love does not arrive as passion or promise, but as shelter, respect, and shared days. And that, for both of them, was more than enough.